Every year, 10,000 people audition for the Velvet Curtain, the only singing competition in America where the judges never see your face until the night you either become a star or you disappear back into the life you came from. This year, one contestant broke the show's 12-year record for the highest blind audition score in its history. Nobody knew her name. Nobody knew her face. All they had was a number, contestant 47, and a voice that made 3 judges weep before she'd even finished the first verse. What they didn't know was that contestant 47 had spent her entire life being laughed at before she ever opened her mouth to sing. And the man who would fall in love with her voice before he ever saw her face was hiding a secret every bit as dangerous as her own. This is the story of the woman they underestimated, and the empire that almost cost her everything. Before we get into tonight's story, if you're the kind of person who loves getting lost in a good long story, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. We put these out regularly, and you don't want to miss the next one. Alright, let's get into it. Mia Calloway had learned, by the age of 7, exactly how a room changes when people first see her. There was always a pause, a half-second of recalibration, where adults' faces did something complicated. Surprise, sometimes pity, occasionally cruelty they didn't bother to hide. Mia was 3 feet, 10 inches tall, a little person born to 2 average-height parents who loved her fiercely and were, in their own way, completely unequipped for the world's response to her. By the time she was in 3rd grade, the nickname had already stuck. The kids at Featherstone Elementary called her the doll, said it like it was sweet, said it in the exact tone that let her know it wasn't. By middle school, it had sharpened into worse things. By high school, in the hallways of a wealthy Nashville prep school her parents had scraped together every dime to afford, the cruelty had a name attached to it. Vivian Drake. Vivian was everything the world seemed built to reward. Tall, effortlessly beautiful, the daughter of a music producer who'd already placed 2 of his other clients on the Billboard charts. Vivian led the choir. Vivian led the whispers. And Vivian, more than anyone else in those 4 years, made sure Mia never forgot what she was: small, other, a punchline waiting to happen. There was one afternoon Mia carried with her for the rest of her life. The way you carry a scar you've stopped noticing until someone touches it. Junior year talent show. Mia had signed up to sing. She'd been singing since she could talk, taught by a grandmother who told her, "Honey, God didn't measure your voice in inches." And she'd worked for months on a song that mattered to her, one her grandmother used to hum while she did the dishes. She got 4 bars into it before Vivian, sitting in the front row with her friends, let out a laugh loud enough to carry to the back of the auditorium. Not subtle, not accidental, a performance of its own, timed perfectly to make sure everyone heard it, everyone joined in. Everyone remembered that Mia Calloway did not belong on that stage. Mia finished the song. She has never, to this day, been sure how. But she walked off that stage and made a decision that would define the next 15 years of her life. She would never again let anyone see her face before they heard her voice. If they were going to laugh, they could laugh at a name, not at her. Fast forward 15 years. Mia was 29 now, living in a modest apartment above a dry cleaner in East Nashville, working days as a receptionist at a dental office and nights giving voice lessons to teenagers over video calls, camera always off, always just her voice guiding theirs. She was good. She was, by any honest measure, exceptional. But exceptional doesn't pay rent, and it certainly doesn't pay for what her younger sister Callie needed. Callie was 24, and 18 months earlier, she'd been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition that was slowly attacking her kidneys. The treatment that could actually stop the progression, not just manage the symptoms, cost more than Mia would make in 4 years at the dental office. Insurance covered a fraction. The rest sat on Mia's shoulders, like a weight she refused to put down, because Callie was the only person besides their late grandmother who had never once looked at Mia and seen anything other than exactly who she was. So when Mia saw the ad for the Velvet Curtain's open call, a fully blind singing competition, contestants judged on voice alone, faces never revealed until the live finale. If they made it that far, she didn't think twice. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about proving anything to Vivian Drake, wherever she'd ended up. It was $100,000 for the winner, and Mia needed exactly that much, almost to the dollar, to get Callie into the trial program at Vanderbilt. She submitted an audio file. 3 days later, she got the call back. Contestant 47, 300 miles away, in a glass office on the top floor of a Charlotte high-rise, Nathaniel Cole was staring at a merger agreement he had absolutely no intention of signing. Not tonight, not this year, maybe not ever, no matter how many times his grandmother reminded him what the Cole family name required of him. Nathaniel Nate, to the very few people who knew him well enough to use it, was 34 years old and, according to Forbes, worth just north of $2 billion. He was also, according to his grandmother Eleanor, dangerously close to squandering the family's most important business relationship in a generation by refusing to marry Charlotte Vance, daughter of the Vance media empire, in a union that would merge two of the largest entertainment conglomerates in the country. It isn't a proposal, Nathaniel, Eleanor had told him over dinner the week before, in the particular tone she used when she'd already decided something was inevitable. It's an arrangement. Charlotte understands that. You'll understand it too, once you stop being sentimental about things that were never meant to last. Nate had given her 90 days. 90 days to find some way out of it that didn't detonate a business relationship 2 generations in the making. He had 81 left. In the meantime, he did the one thing that had kept him sane through years of boardrooms and inherited obligations. He disappeared, whenever he could, into work that had nothing to do with his name. This season, that meant serving, quietly, anonymously, under the name Nate Hollis, as an unpaid production assistant and off-camera vocal mentor for The Velvet Curtain, a show he genuinely loved since it first aired, back when he was a college kid who dreamed, briefly and privately, of a life that wasn't already written for him. Nobody at the show knew who he really was. Nobody needed to. He answered emails, coached nervous contestants through their nerves before blind auditions, and existed, for a few hours a week, as simply Nate. Not Cole, not an heir, not a headline. That was where he first heard Contestant 47. The blind auditions worked like this. Contestants sang from behind a heavy velvet curtain, judges seated with their backs turned, unable to see anything but hear everything. If a judge wanted to advance a contestant, they'd press a button, and the curtain would rise, but only after their decision was locked in, face unseen, judgment made purely on sound. Nate wasn't a judge. He didn't have a button, but he sat in the sound booth most nights, monitoring feeds, and when contestant 47's audio came through the line for her pre-audition sound check, he stopped what he was doing entirely. It wasn't just that she was good. Nashville was full of good singers. That was the whole premise of the show. It was something underneath the technical skill, a rawness, an ache in the low register that sounded like someone who had survived something and had decided, somewhere along the way, to turn the surviving into sound instead of silence. He typed a note to the judges before her live audition, something he almost never did. Listen closely to 47. I think this one might be the reason we do this show. Quick pause before we continue. If you're enjoying this one, drop a like on the video. It genuinely helps small channels like ours get seen by more people, and it costs you nothing. Alright, back to Mia. The night of her live blind audition, Mia stood behind the velvet curtain with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She could hear the murmur of the studio audience beyond the fabric, could hear the judges settling into their chairs, backs to the stage, exactly as promised. She thought of Callie. She thought of her grandmother's hands in dishwater, humming. She opened her mouth, and she sang. The song was one she'd written herself. Nobody had heard it before, not even her voice students. It was about being small in a world built for people who weren't, about the particular loneliness of being looked at before you were ever truly seen. She didn't dress it up in metaphor. She let it be exactly what it was. By the second verse, one judge had already turned around. A rule violation, technically, but nobody stopped her. By the bridge, all three had turned, and the audience, initially quiet out of shock at the sheer unfamiliarity of the sound, rose into applause so loud it drowned out the last note entirely. When the curtain finally rose, and the audience saw her, all 3 feet, 10 inches of her, standing alone on that enormous stage, there was, for one terrible half-second, the exact pause Mia had spent her whole life dreading. And then it broke, not into laughter, but into something that sounded almost like relief. The applause didn't dim. If anything, it grew. Somewhere in the control booth, watching through the monitor, Nate Cole felt something shift in his chest that he did not yet have a name for. Her score that night, 98.4 out of 100, broke a 12-year-old record. By morning, clips of her audition had 15 million views. Nobody knew her real name yet. The internet had already started calling her the Velvet Voice. The rules of the competition kept contestants anonymous through the first 6 rounds. No last names used on air. Faces obscured in all promotional material until the live finale. All correspondence between contestants and the production team routed through show emails rather than personal contact, specifically to prevent outside influence or sabotage. It was through one of those routed emails that Mia first heard from someone signing their notes simply as N. Hollis, vocal support. Brief, insightful messages after each round, pointing out something specific and true about her performance that no one else seemed to notice. Not generic encouragement, actual careful attention. She started looking forward to those emails more than she probably should have. He noticed the crack in your voice on the bridge and thought it was the most honest 4 seconds of the whole night. Don't smooth it out in the studio version. That crack is the whole song. She wrote back once, just to say thank you. He wrote back within the hour. It became, over the following weeks, a quiet correspondence neither of them quite named. 2 people who'd never seen each other's faces, building something that felt, strangely, more honest than most relationships built on sight ever managed to be. Neither of them knew the other's name. Neither of them knew what the other actually looked like, or how much money sat in either of their bank accounts, or how much either of them had riding on secrets they hadn't told a soul on this show. Vivian Drake had not thought about Mia Calloway in nearly a decade, until the morning her father, now a senior producer on the Velvet Curtain's judging panel, mentioned over breakfast that contestant 47's real identity had crossed his desk during a routine background check, and that the name on the file was one Vivian recognized immediately. Vivian's career, unlike the one her father had promised her at 17, had stalled somewhere in her late 20s. 2 failed singles, a record deal that quietly evaporated, a slow slide into a producer's assistant role she told everyone was strategic and new, privately, was a demotion dressed up in better lighting. Watching someone she'd spent years humiliating rise this fast, this publicly, lit something ugly and immediate in her. She didn't act on it right away. She waited. She watched Mia's numbers climb round after round, watched the internet fall in love with a woman whose face they still hadn't seen, and she began, quietly, to plan exactly how and when she would make sure the reveal, when it finally came, would destroy Mia instead of crowning her. It nearly happened 3 rounds before the finale. Vivian, using her father's producer credentials, arranged to accidentally leak a single blurry photograph to a gossip account. Mia entering the studio's back entrance, height unmistakable even from a distance, though her face wasn't visible enough to be certain. The photo went up at 11 p.m. By midnight, it had 40,000 shares, and message boards were already speculating, cruelly, about what the Velvet Voice might actually look like. Mia found out at 2 a.m. when a fan account sent her the photo directly, care of the show's contestant portal. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone shaking in her hand, and felt 15 years of careful anonymity threatening to collapse in real time, hours before her semifinal performance. She didn't sleep. At 6 a.m., desperate and not entirely thinking clearly, she wrote to N. Hollis, the only person on this entire show who felt safe. I think someone's trying to expose me before I'm ready. I don't know if I can go on stage tonight. His reply came back in 11 minutes. Whoever they are, they're afraid of you. People don't try to silence voices that don't scare them. Sing tonight the way you always do. Like the truth is the only thing you've got left to lose. Because it is, and it's enough. She read it 4 times. She went on stage that night and delivered the highest-scoring semifinal performance in the show's history. Nate's 90 days were down to without a face attached when his grandmother called an emergency into a family nobody could confirm. Informed him, Vivian's first attempt had failed, that the engagement announcement to Charlotte Vance would go out to press the following month, timed deliberately, to coincide with the Velvet Curtain's live finale, since half the country's entertainment press would already be gathered in one place. You'll attend the finale as planned, Eleanor told him, not unkindly, but with the particular finality she reserved for decisions already made. And the following week, you'll stand beside Charlotte and give this family the future it needs. I know you've enjoyed your little disappearing act at that television show, Nathaniel. It's time to come back to your actual life. Nate said nothing that night, but driving home, he understood, with a clarity that frightened him, that he had begun thinking about a woman whose face he had never seen more than he had thought about the life he was apparently contractually obligated to return to. He didn't know her name. He didn't know what she looked like. He knew the exact way she phrased her doubt at 2 a.m., and the exact way she'd answered it with a performance that broke a 12-year record hours later. It was, he realized, entirely possible he was falling in love with a voice. He had 19 days to figure out what to do about that. He didn't yet know that Mia had a ticking clock of her own. Callie's trial program had a hard enrollment deadline, 3 days after the finale, and if Mia didn't win, or place high enough to cover the difference, there would be no second chance to try again in time. Vivian's second attempt came the week of the finale, and this time, she wasn't relying on anonymous photo leaks. She approached Danielle Ruiz, a fellow finalist Mia had grown close to over the competition's run, one of the only other contestants who treated her like a person rather than a novelty, with an offer dressed up as concern. I just think Mia deserves to control her own reveal, Vivian told Danielle, over coffee neither of them had asked to share. Wouldn't it be better if a friend did it gently before the finale, instead of some stranger doing it cruelly on live television? Danielle, genuinely fond of Mia and genuinely worried, believed her. She didn't know Vivian's history. She didn't know the offer came with a check attached, a very large one, wired the same afternoon Danielle agreed to quietly confirm Mia's identity to a national entertainment outlet 2 days before the finale. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. The Velvet Voice revealed. The woman behind America's most talked about voice is a little person, and some fans or furious producers hit it. The comment sections were exactly as ugly as 15 years of Mia's life had trained her to expect. And worse than the stranger's cruelty was the betrayal underneath it. Danielle, someone she'd trusted, had been the source. Mia read every word of it alone in her apartment. The finale 48 hours away. And for the first time, since she was 17 years old standing on that auditorium stage, while Vivian Drake laughed loud enough for the whole room to hear, she seriously considered not showing up at all. It was Nate who found her, not as Anne Hollis this time, but as himself. He tracked down her actual contact information through the show's producer database. An overreach he knew perfectly well violated a dozen contest rules, and he did not care. He didn't call. He drove 3 hours from Charlotte to Nashville and knocked on the door of an apartment above a dry cleaner he'd never seen before, holding nothing but his phone with 11 weeks of their correspondence still open on the screen. When Mia opened the door and saw, for the first time, the face behind Dan Hollis, she felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her. "You're not a vocal coach," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd seen his face on the news twice in the last 6 months, standing beside his grandmother at some gala, though she hadn't put the name together until this exact moment. "No," Nate admitted. "I'm Nathaniel Cole, and in about 17 days, my family is going to announce my engagement to a woman I've met 4 times in my life, because it's good for a merger. I've spent the last 3 months hiding from that life in a sound booth, listening to your voice, and it is the only thing that's felt true to me in years." He held up his phone. "I know I don't have the right to ask you this, but don't let what those people did to you today decide whether you walk onto that stage in 2 days. You've spent your whole life letting other people's cruelty write the ending. Please don't let them write this one too." Mia stood in the doorway a long moment, the ugliness of the last 2 days still raw in her chest, and looked at the first person outside her family who had ever fought this hard to see her stay standing. "I need to win," she said finally quietly. "Not for pride. My sister needs that money in 3 days, or she loses her spot in a treatment trial that might save her life. I can't afford to fall apart right now. I can't afford anything less than everything." "Then let's make sure nothing takes that from you," Nate said, "starting with whoever did this." The live finale of The Velvet Curtain drew the show's largest audience in its history. Curiosity, cruelty, and genuine hope for Mia's redemption all tangled together in the same viewership numbers. Backstage, 20 minutes before she was due to walk out, Danielle Ruiz found Mia alone, and to her enormous credit, didn't try to hide or excuse what she'd done. "Vivian Drake paid me," she said, the words visibly costing her something. "I didn't know the whole history between you two. I should have asked before I said anything. I'm sorry doesn't fix it, but it's all I've got." Mia absorbed this in silence. Somewhere behind the curtain, she could hear the crowd settling, could hear the low hum of a room that had already decided, before she'd sung a single note tonight, that they thought they knew exactly who she was. She walked on stage, not hidden behind a curtain this time, but in full view. Her choice, offered to her by producers scrambling to control a narrative that had already spiraled far past their control. Full house, full lights, nowhere to hide. She looked out at the crowd, found Nate's face in the front row, no longer hiding as Ann Hollis, sitting instead beside an empty seat that had been reserved, until 3 hours earlier, for Charlotte Vance and his grandmother, both of whom had just watched, live on their phones, the man they needed to marry into a merger publicly abandon a gala appearance to sit in the front row of a singing competition instead. Mia took a breath and sang the same song she'd written for her audition months earlier, the one about being looked at before being seen. Except this time, she added a final verse she had written only that morning, sitting on the edge of her bed at 4 a.m., about a voice in her inbox that had told her, at exactly the moment she needed it most, that her truth was enough. When she finished, the arena did not laugh. It rose entirely to its feet, in an ovation that lasted nearly 4 full minutes before the judges could even begin to speak. The scores that night broke every record the show had ever kept. Mia Calloway won the Velvet Curtain outright, $100,000, a recording contract, and something no prize money could buy. 15 million people who had watched in real time. Someone refused to let cruelty have the final word. Vivian Drake's involvement in leaking Mia's identity came out within the week. Danielle, in a public statement of her own, confirmed the payment and the pressure, and Vivian's father quietly terminated her position days later, her name trending for reasons that finally had nothing to do with anyone else's humiliation but her own. Nate's family did not take his public choice well, not at first. The merger with the Vance family collapsed within the month, a business cost that ran into the tens of millions. But 3 months later, at a much smaller, much quieter dinner than the one where his grandmother had once informed him of his obligations, Nathaniel Cole sat across from Mia Calloway for the first time, listened to her speak about her sister, her grandmother, the 15 years she'd spent hiding a gift the world wasn't ready to see, and told her nephew, quietly, that she'd been wrong about a great many things, and that this, at least, was not one of them. Callie got her treatment. The trial worked. 2 years later, at Mia and Nate's wedding, small, deliberately unglamorous, exactly as Mia had wanted it, Callie stood as her sister's maid of honor, healthy, radiant, alive. Mia Calloway never stopped writing music. Her second album, released the following spring, opened with a song called Contestant 47, about a girl who spent 15 years believing she had to disappear behind a curtain to be loved, and the one voice, finally, that told her she never had. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone to see past the first half-second of judgment. Mia Calloway spent hers learning that the wait, however long, is worth it. If you never let anyone talk you out of the voice underneath. If this story moved you tonight, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their truth is enough too. We'll see you in the next one.